Hey everyone, I'm Mariana, this is Impression Blend, and welcome to another monthly wrap-up. I watched a lot of stuff in May, and you guys are always asking me what I've been watching, so I'm gonna tell you. I hope you're comfortable. Let's start with TV series, and the first thing I want to talk about is Dark Matter, an Apple TV Plus miniseries. This is essentially a multiverse thriller. Jason, a physicist from Chicago, wakes up in an alternate version of his life. People he knows aren't recognizing him, he's not married to the same woman, he doesn't work the same job, so now Jason has to figure out a way to get back to his timeline, which also means encountering a very different version of himself. The show is based on a novel under the same name by Blake Crouch, who writes really fun and fast-paced sci-fi thrillers, and he was actually heavily involved in the series, including writing a bunch of the episodes, which is always a good sign. Here's the thing, the series is a lot of fun. It's action-packed, the cast is awesome, including Joel Edgerton and Jennifer Connelly, but it does take a few episodes to get going. It grabs you with the first episode, but after that there is some more setup, and it isn't until episode 4 that it really gets good. And yes, I have seen the entire series, even though currently only half of it has aired, and I can tell you that your patience in the earlier episodes is going to pay off. I particularly loved seeing all of the different versions of Chicago, even though Jason makes some questionable choices along the way. Honestly, if it wasn't for the first few episodes, this would have been an 8 out of 10 for me, but the beginning drags it down a bit to a 7, which is still a pretty strong recommendation as far as my ratings go. If you enjoy sci-fi thrillers, if the premise sounds interesting to you, and of course, if you enjoyed the novel, I definitely recommend it. The other series I've been watching is Fallout on Amazon Prime. Finally catching up, probably the last person who hasn't seen it, and I'm currently about halfway through. What a fun series. You guys were so right recommending this to me. This is a post-apocalyptic, retro-futuristic, action-adventure drama. I know, it's a lot of genres. It's based on the famous video game franchise, but it's following a new character, Lucy, who, as far as I know, isn't in the games. Basically, after a nuclear exchange, a bunch of people went underground into vaults, while others somehow survived on the surface, and 200 years later, Lucy, who has never seen the outside world, ventures out into the wasteland to look for her father. I obviously can't give you a full review just yet because I haven't finished the season, but I'm really enjoying the playful tone, the humor, the retro soundtrack is so cool, the crazy monsters, and the fact that despite the landscape being post-apocalyptic, they still found a way to make the setting rich and vibrant. Plus, you can't go wrong with this cast. Walton Goggins, Ella Purnell, Kyle MacLachlan, just to name a few. This is going great for me. Not going to give it a rating just yet, but I'm having a good time and I'm really excited to see where this story is going. And I hear season 2 is definitely happening, so I'm happy that there's even more to look forward to in the future. But that is it for TV shows. I didn't watch too many, so let's move on to the movies and look through the month of May on my Letterboxd. If you don't follow me there, I invite you to check it out. You can find me under Impression Blend, and I log and review every movie I watch on this website. So, things did not start off strong in May, as you can see. The first thing I watched is Humane, which is Caitlin Cronenberg's feature film debut. Those Cronenbergs, they're just gonna keep making horror movies, aren't they? This is set in the future where an environmental collapse has been going on, and now humanity has to get rid of 20% of its population, and people have been volunteering. So we are following the situation at a family dinner of rich people who, in a way, are involved with all of this. We find out that the father of the family and his wife have, in fact, volunteered, and people are about to show up to collect them, so to speak, to perform the procedure, but something goes very wrong. This may sound a little bit harsh, but I gotta be honest, the setup and the minimal world building that's going on in the background were more interesting to me than the actual movie. They didn't really do much with all of that, and there was definitely a lot more to explore. I think this could have been really interesting and a really great commentary and a really great what if scenario, but they just decided to take that interesting premise and make it into kind of a basic slasher thriller horror film, which, you know what? Fine, do that, I guess. But the slasher and survival horror film of people trapped in the house part of it all is not executed well either. It has really obnoxious characters. They're honestly just all very annoying. You want none of them to survive, and they make really dumb decisions. All of them, the people trying to pick somebody up, the kids, the parents, they are all just very frustrating. I did not care about any of them. I was not worried about any of them. I was just sitting there waiting for this movie to be over. I am giving it a 4 out of 10. I was not a fan, and I feel like they wasted their amazing premise. Next up, I watched Marrowbone, and this was a very different kind of ghost story. I'm not going to lie, I mainly watched this movie for the cast because let me list some names for you. We got George Mackay, we got Anya Taylor-Joy, we got Charlie Heaton, we got Mia Goth. I mean, come on, I had to see what this horror movie was all about. It's a very mysterious movie. You're not really sure what exactly is going on, but on its surface, it's about a young man and his 3 younger siblings who are kind of haunted by this sinister presence in their old house where they have been left alone. This is much more of a dark atmospheric drama rather than an actual horror film, but it does feel very moody and very kind of sinister. You know something is going on there that's not right. It's also definitely a slow burn, and I will say a lot of the dialogue is very awkward, even though it's a period piece and you kind of expect the dialogue to sound a little bit different, but I don't think the actors were really connecting with what was written because some of it just came off a little strange and stiff. There is somewhat of a plot twist in there as well that's more of a reveal, and it does feel very familiar. That's all I can say without actually ruining anything. And I would say this movie is worth watching. However, now that I'm looking at the list of the movies that I watched, I completely forgot that I watched it, and that is not a good sign. It has not stuck around with me. It did not make a strong impression. It is not a bad film, and I don't regret watching it because now that I'm recalling how I felt watching it, trying to guess what was going on, it was interesting, but it's not great. It's not amazing. As you can see, I ended up giving it a 6 out of 10, and that is a proper rating for it. It's not a bad movie, but it also clearly is not very memorable. Next up, I watched Lover, Stalker, Killer on Netflix. I just could not resist a Netflix true crime documentary, clearly. I mean, can you blame me? They have a formula and they just suck you in with the premise, okay? Listen to this. In this twisting documentary, a mechanic tries online dating for the first time and meets a woman who takes romantic obsession to a deadly extreme. I mean, don't you want to know? I wanted to know. And I was satisfied with my experience. There's no groundbreaking documentary filmmaking that is going to blow your mind in this documentary. How many times am I going to say the word documentary here? But this was just a well-told, absolutely insane story about an awful person and about how scary dating websites can be. You know what? I got what I came for. I am not complaining. I am satisfied. This is a solid 6 out of 10 because it's once again not something that's going to stick with you for a long time. It's not breaking new ground of filmmaking, but you know, it was a fun time. What can I say? If there were 10 more of these on different crazy cases, I would watch them. So yeah, a solid 6 out of 10. I actually do recommend this if you want to hear a pretty crazy true crime story. Next up, I rewatched Dawn of the Planet of the Apes and War for the Planet of the Apes. I did rewatch Rise of the Planet of the Apes at the end of April because I was preparing for Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes. Why do these movies have the longest titles in the world? I mean, I understand they're keeping their branding going, but can we shorten it a little bit? This is getting out of hand. But anyway, I haven't seen these movies since watching them in theaters. And in my mind, I remember really enjoying Rise and Dawn. I mean, Dawn is pretty much everybody's favorite out of the newer ones. And then feeling kind of mixed on War. I think a lot of people were expecting a different movie from War for the Planet of the Apes. And I think at that point in my life, I was too. It is not as action-packed as you would expect. It is pretty dark and depressing. There's a whole section that is a big downer. And I was just, in my mind, that was the worst one out of the three, even though they were all good. But upon this rewatch, I have to tell you, I think War is actually the best movie out of that trilogy. I know, I am surprised myself. I'm not going to go into details as far as the plot goes for these movies. I'm sure you guys already know. I will say when it comes to Dawn of the Planet of the Apes, it is still impressive. They all hold up really well, but the upgrade in visuals, in themes, in storytelling between Rise and Dawn is absolutely insane. It's a really, really good movie. There are some scenes in there that will absolutely give you chills. I really enjoyed that one, gave that one an 8 out of 10. But when it came to War, it just really hit me this time around on this rewatch. And I do recommend all of you, if you haven't done so before the new movie, just rewatch this trilogy. See how your perception of these movies might have changed, because mine certainly did, and it really took me by surprise how powerful War for the Planet of the Apes was. It is so powerful emotionally. The characters are simply outstanding. Do I even need to mention the visual effects and the cinematography, the score, the writing, everything, which is also true for Dawn, but in War, it really all comes together into this amazing finale. You can actually see my older review for War for the Planet of the Apes on Letterboxd when I first watched it in theaters. This is how long I've been on Letterboxd, guys. And there are some issues that I bring up in this review that are just not a thing. I was flat out wrong. Sometimes you're just wrong about a movie. I mean, it's been, 7 years? I'm a different person at this point, probably. But really, I had complaints about the humans. I had complaints about the villain being one-dimensional. That complaint is absolutely crazy. The villain is amazing, and the scene between him and Caesar is just chilling in the few scenes that they have together. Anyway, I'm gonna stop talking about Planet of the Apes. I think you should rewatch the trilogy if you haven't. War for the Planet of the Apes is the best of the three. I am giving Dawn of the Planet of the Apes 8 out of 10 and War 9 out of 10. Yes, I am. Next up, I watched Humanist Vampire Seeking Consenting Suicidal Person. What a change of pace between those two movies. I clearly needed to relax a little bit, so I watched that one. This movie is a vampire coming of age story, believe it or not, and it is really charming and really cute. It's about this young vampire, Sasha, who has too much compassion and empathy to kill anyone, to feed on them, and her parents are very frustrated with her feeding on blood bags still, so they decide to cut her off, and she has to figure out how to feed, basically. And that is part of her coming of age. She meets a guy. He feels like he does not want to live anymore, so this might be a solution for her, and obviously they get to know each other. It's an adorable film. I absolutely think you should watch it. It is so charming in this kind of indie drama way. It's funny, it's moody, it's quirky, it is very unique in its tone. Despite the subject matter, it is a very easy movie to recommend. I actually think most people would enjoy this one just because of how adorable everything is, which sounds funny saying this about a movie with that kind of premise and with that kind of title, but I promise you, you will not regret it. It is a lovely, lovely film, and currently it's actually one of my top 10 movies of the year because that's how much I enjoyed it. Everything about this just works. It's a short movie. It's only an hour and a half. You cannot go wrong with this one. So if you can watch it, definitely check it out. I ended up giving it an 8 out of 10. Then I saw the TV Glow. I ended up giving it a 7 out of 10, and I do have a full review of this one on my channel. If you missed it, check it out. Any reviews I talk about will be listed in the info box below, as per usual. Then I embarked on a Mad Max franchise rewatch, but before I get into that, as you can see, there's also Kingdom of the Planet of the Apes here, which I also have a review for that you obviously need to watch because I saw a bunch of you did not watch some of my recent reviews. So check that one out as well. I did really enjoy the movie, by the way. Now, Mad Max. I have seen Mad Max movies before. This is definitely a rewatch, but I have not seen them in a while. And here's what I'll say. They are all very different, and that is part of the appeal of the franchise for me. I have my favorites, obviously, and if you know me, you know what my favorite Mad Max movie is. But as far as the original trilogy goes, each of them has something new and interesting to offer. The original film, Mad Max 1979, is an insane achievement in guerrilla, low-budget filmmaking. How this movie came together is crazy, and if you learn about how this movie was made, it is absolutely insane that this movie even exists. The original Mad Max is also the least post-apocalyptic of all of them. Yes, it feels a little bit dystopian, but it doesn't feel completely like the world has fallen apart, if you know what I mean. It is a story of revenge that takes a while to get going, and that is part of the issue. You're watching this, and for the first half, you're just waiting for something to happen. You're waiting for this to kick into gear. The second half of this movie is so much better, has so much energy, so much more interesting than the first half that it's hard to really love this film, at least for me. I remembered it to be a bit more impressive narratively the first time I watched it, but the second time around, it just didn't quite click for me as much as I wanted it to, even though I still appreciate a lot about this film. The character arc for Max is definitely interesting here, though. You start with this happy cop, essentially, whose life pretty much falls apart, and this movie even features a saw trap, believe it or not. If you've seen the movie, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I did not remember that being part of the movie, so when I saw it, it just, it was quite special. But yeah, original Mad Max, tragic, gritty, origin story for an iconic character, a solid 6 out of 10 for me. I was close to giving it a 7, but I did have to keep it at a 6. I don't think I'm going to be watching this movie anytime soon. Now, as far as Mad Max 2, also known as Road Warrior, this is the biggest upgrade from the first movie to its sequel, or one of the biggest upgrades I've ever seen, because this one is actually really excellent. I love this movie. The world has changed. The world building is so much more expansive. There's definitely a post-apocalyptic situation going on now in Australia. We do get a glimpse of what happened before, and we meet Max in his final form, so to speak, of being this loner and shell of a man who just keeps going, but kind of has almost nothing left inside him. There's a lot of action, there's a lot of leather and crazy outfits, which this franchise is definitely famous for. There are a lot of car chases. You can really see the upgrade on the car chases in this movie, and it is just a solid film. George Miller definitely refined his style in this one, and you can tell he has that grasp on visual storytelling in this sequel. We have a memorable filmmaking style, we have great villains, we have a no-nonsense lead character, we, as I mentioned, have amazing action sequences. I cannot believe, by the way, that they pulled these stunts off in the 80s. I have no idea how they did it. This all looked very dangerous. But yes, if you do watch any of the original trilogy movies, if you need one recommendation and if you don't want to commit to all three, this is the one you watch 100%. This is a 9 out of 10 for me. Love this movie. And then we go to Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, which is the most 80s Mad Max movie you can imagine, featuring Tina Turner. At first, there is this arena situation and a crazy fight from different angles. And then we get into this strange and kind of whimsical Lord of the Flies / Peter Pan scenario. If these two things sound very disjointed and like they don't go together, like survival arena and Peter Pan / Lord of the Flies whimsy, it's because that's how this movie is. It just feels like two different kinds of movie put into one, and this movie's a mess. We all know this movie's a mess. I know Thunderdome has its fans, but I am sorry. This movie is crazy and not in a good way. And here's the thing. I do know this was a complicated production for George Miller and that it was an emotionally difficult movie for him to make for personal reasons. I do appreciate the attempt at world building, and I appreciate the costumes getting crazier and this kind of approach to Max as a mythological character. It's not as much of a Mad Max movie as it is a movie about the myth of Mad Max. And that is an interesting idea on paper. I just don't think it works as a movie. It is very strange. Also, this is a Mad Max movie with barely any car chases or car action, and that is just not how I want to experience my Mad Max movies. I give this movie a 4 out of 10. Still not completely unwatchable, but I don't think it's good. I'm sorry if you're a fan. Then I watched Stop Motion, which is an indie horror film that turned out to be unexpectedly gross and just genuinely very unsettling. The story is about a stop motion animator who is trying to help her sick mother finish a project, but also is struggling with her own creativity and just keeping it all together. And her mind just starts to unravel. Her project keeps getting weirder and weirder, and all of this ends up being completely unhinged. This was definitely not the movie for me. It was just a very unpleasant experience to watch all of that. I would never watch that again, and I would definitely recommend watching the trailer for this and seeing if the tone of this film and the super mild things that they show in the trailer are even your vibe at all. Because if you don't feel like that is something you could be into, you would definitely not like it because it gets a lot more gross and a lot crazier. People who would enjoy this movie are people who really want the horror to get under their skin and to truly just be grossed out. Not in a cool, exciting way, but actually in a very disturbing way. I even had to look away from some of this, and that does not happen to me very often, but this movie, it definitely got me, and there are some sounds in there, some sound design that is also way too effective. Visually way too effective, and the sound is way too effective. And I know some of you are sitting there going, yes, I need this movie in your life. Good for you. Enjoy. This was absolutely not for me, which is weird because those heroine unraveling types of movies are usually very much my cup of tea. I enjoy this psychological deterioration of the lead character, and that part I definitely enjoyed just on its own, but the way it all turned out visually and how she unraveled, absolutely not. No, thank you. I ended up giving this a 6 out of 10, even though I would have technically given it a 4 or a 5 if I was just rating based on my enjoyment, but I had to give it a little bit of extra credit for how genuinely unhinged all of this was. So yeah, 6 out of 10, but enjoyment wise, more like a 4 for me. Next up, I watched New Life. As you can see, I was on a mission to discover some smaller movies, some hidden gems. I'm always looking for those. And this one is actually a new film I have not heard a single person talk about. It's not perfect, but it is certainly a hidden gem. Now, unfortunately, I cannot tell you that much about it because it definitely is one of those movies that you should go in knowing as little as possible. Don't even look up the premise. Don't look up anything about this film. Don't watch the trailer. Just know that this is a horror thriller that somebody is on the run. You don't know why. You don't know from who or for what reason, what is going on, but it's clear that something really bad happened. That is all you need to know. If that intrigues you, absolutely watch this movie. Just see where it takes you because the mystery of it all is definitely part of the journey. That doesn't make it super rewatchable just because once you know what's going on, you might not be as engaged in it. But on the other hand, it might be one of those movies that you rewatch and you pick up on the clues along the way. I don't know. I've only seen it once. But it is a quick and intense thriller. Even though it's not perfect, I really enjoyed my time watching it. It's only 85 minutes long, so it's not going to take too much of your time. But I do recommend it if you're looking for something that nobody has talked about. And if you have seen this movie, let me know in the comments. What did you think? I ended up giving this one a 7 out of 10. Next up, I have The Last Stop in Yuma Country. And this one was another 7 out of 10 for me. This one is set in Arizona in the middle of nowhere at a rest stop. And people are sitting there waiting for the fuel truck to come. Little did they know that they end up sitting in the same room with some very dangerous people. This turns into a hostage situation. This turns into a lot of problems and a lot of bloodshed. This is a very neat little thriller. There's a lot of tension. It has a great atmosphere. It has a great cast. It is definitely a fun watch. But the movie definitely peaks a little early, and then after that, the whole ending feels just a bit drawn out and anticlimactic, and all of this kind of takes a turn. Everything up until kind of the climax of this diner encounter, that was all great, and the most intense scene, you will know when it happens, is great, but everything after that just takes too long, and it kind of lost me in the last part of the movie, which is longer than it needed to be, and personally, I did not enjoy how the movie concluded. I don't have a ton to say about it. If you enjoy one-location thrillers, you should definitely give this one a try. For me, this was a solid 7 out of 10. Enjoyed my time. Probably not going to watch this one again. After that, finally, I watched Challengers. I will say, I was not super interested in this movie. Everybody was so excited for it. The trailers kind of didn't really sell me, but the movie is as good as people say it is. It's full of power plays. It's full of mind games. The love triangle at the center of it is done really well. And you guys know love triangles are a hard thing to do. They usually are very annoying. This one is not. This one is really good and it makes sense. You understand what's going on there. And more importantly, you understand why this movie is unfolding the way it is. It is told in a non-linear way, which makes a lot of sense for what the whole story is going for. There's some very intense and high stakes tennis going on here, and those matches are a joy to watch, not just because tennis is a pretty involving game and it's interesting to watch to begin with, but also because of the way it's shot, the way the camera is used. It is beautiful. Genuinely a surprise for me because I did not think I was going to enjoy this movie as much as I did, but I did enjoy it quite a bit. And yes, it is a pretty horny movie, as you would expect. But, you know, in a good way, not in a ridiculous way. Some ridiculous, but still in a good way. If you're like me and you had doubts about this movie, definitely give this a chance. I ended up giving it an 8 out of 10. Next up, I watched Mad Max Fury Road for who knows what time. I watched this movie a lot. It is one of my all-time favorite films. I do have an old review of this movie on my channel, so you can check it out. It is from back when it came out. It is from when I just started my channel. So it's definitely a throwback. Check that review out because I still agree with everything I said in that review. And obviously, as this is one of my all-time favorites, this is a 10 out of 10. Amazing action film. This is one of the best action films ever made. I will not be taking any questions about that or opposite opinions. It is amazing. Then I watched a 90s, you could say classic. I don't know if it's a classic, but it's a 90s movie that was very popular that I somehow have not seen until now, and that is Wild Things. Now, I was actually surprised by this one because I expected it to be cheesy and ridiculous and just a lot of teenage nonsense. I don't know why. That was the impression I had about this movie, but it actually has a legitimate mystery with so many plot twists at its core. It is still a pretty ridiculous movie, but I was engaged and locked in watching it. Here's what the premise says. When teen socialite Kelly and troubled bad girl Susie, those names, accuse guidance counselor Sam of assault, he is suspended by the school, rejected by the town, and fighting to get his life back. One cop suspects conspiracy, but nothing is what it seems. Doesn't this seem like the most cheesy 90s thing ever, and that this would not be a good movie, but it's actually surprisingly decent? First of all, the plot twists, as I mentioned. Oh my god, so many of them. Almost too many plot twists at this point, but they do keep you on your toes. They do keep you guessing. It is murderous. It is scandalous. It is another horny movie that I watched, and it was a very solid, surprisingly solid erotic thriller. I wish more movies like this were made. It is by no means a masterpiece, but what it's doing is doing very well, and it knows exactly the kind of movie it is. The mystery and the murder aspect of it all, just, it works. What can I say? It works. I ended up giving this a 7 out of 10. If, like me, you somehow have not seen this movie until now, check it out. Yes, it's ridiculous, but also, you know, kind of great. Next up, I watched Furiosa. I do have a full review of this movie. Long story short, I enjoyed it a lot. It is no Mad Max Fury Road because what is, but it is still a really good movie. I ended up giving it an 8 out of 10. Check out my review if you haven't seen it yet. No spoilers there. Then I watched The Fall Guy, and I am not gonna lie, I was disappointed how middle of the road this movie was. I was expecting this to be a lot of fun, a love letter to cinema, a love letter to stunts and stunt teams, and it fell pretty flat for me, unfortunately. Ryan Gosling plays a stuntman and Emily Blunt plays a director. They have a history. They are definitely flirtatious, but there is an accident that happens that really takes out Ryan Gosling's character out of action, out of work, and he comes back much later to kind of rekindle his romance and also to work with this director again. And let me just say, Emily Blunt and Ryan Gosling have amazing on-screen chemistry. I loved seeing them together. They're both funny, they're both charming, and when they are together on the same screen, it works. And that is the best thing about this movie. Unfortunately, there's just too much filler and too much nonsense in this movie that is distracting from how funny Ryan Gosling is and how funny Emily Blunt is and how funny they are together. I needed more of that and a lot less of everything else. I was having a decent time, and the parts that I did like, I liked a lot. However, disappointing. I think this movie got ruined in the edit, and I think Something just did not go right there. I ended up giving this a 6 out of 10 for the parts that I did enjoy, but just the filler was killing me. And something about the editing needed to work a lot better, because I do think there's a good, fun rom-com in there. It just didn't work as well as it could have. Next up, I decided to give another fun, supposedly movie a try, and that is The Ministry of Ungentlemanly Warfare. Honestly, I have no idea why I still bother with Guy Ritchie movies, because I fall for the trailer, I fall for the cast, the trailers look fun, the cast look like they're having fun. I think, okay, this one, it's gonna be great. I know all of the previous ones have been ridiculous and I did not enjoy them, but this one is definitely going to work. I mean, come on, here's Henry Cavill, here are all these people, they're having a good, No, this movie is just so average and so bland, and I just hope they all got paid well. This is essentially Guy Ritchie's Inglourious Basterds, and all I was thinking watching this movie is that I should have been watching Inglourious Basterds instead. This should have been an easy win for Guy Ritchie. This kind of cast, killing Nazis, having fun, crazy action. Why didn't this work? Why was this so boring? Henry Cavill's beard can only do so much for this movie. Listen, once again, it's not a terrible film. It is just very average and very bland and very forgettable. It is like every other recent Guy Ritchie movie you have seen. If you enjoyed them, you will probably enjoy this as well. Nothing terrible and offensively bad happened in this movie either, but it was just bland and average in a way that I found deeply uninteresting. So yeah, that's the reason for the middle of the road 5 out of 10. Now, a movie that did not disappoint me is The First Omen, the prequel to the iconic horror film, The Omen. Oh my God, how is this movie so good? This is how you do a prequel. They pretty much nailed it. The only reason I didn't give it a higher rating is because it is pretty predictable and you can see where it's going. The way I would describe this movie is, and hear me out, I hated Immaculate, okay? I'm sorry, I know some people loved it. I hated it. But this is if Immaculate was actually a good horror movie. That's it. A young American woman is sent to Rome to begin her life as a nun. And basically, if you know what The Omen is about, they're trying to birth the Antichrist in this movie. And spoiler alert, because The Omen exists, they succeed. And that is the story of how all of that happened. The First Omen is very effective as a horror film, and some of this was actually very uncomfortable to watch. I was surprised by how much they actually showed in this movie. Yeah, I don't want to go into the details, but the atmosphere works, the build up to the finale that we're all expecting works. It feels very 70s. There's a lot of body horror going on, but in a way that is actually very interesting and very impressive. And they do add some callbacks to the original film that absolutely work as well, and they're very well placed. I also have to say I loved Nell Tiger-Free, who was the lead of this film. She is really good as an actress. It is just a really well done horror film, one of the biggest horror surprises of the year for me. Definitely recommend. I would totally watch a sequel to this prequel, which sounds confusing, but they clearly have left some room for that. It doesn't need a sequel, but there is some room for it. And you know what? I would watch it and I would probably enjoy it. A solid 8 out of 10 for The First Omen. Cannot believe that this is the horror movie that I enjoyed. Unlike Tarot, which was a really bad horror movie. I mean, what are we doing here? This feels like one of those early 2000s horror movies that are so cliche and so obvious. All of the characters are dumb. Nothing good is going on. The only cool thing about it is the setup and the tarot cards come to life monsters. that's fun, and that's the only good thing I have to say about this. You know exactly how this movie is going to go. You know these characters are going to die. You know how they're going to die because of the premise of the film. They do a tarot reading, and it kind of talks about what they should avoid or what's going to happen to them. It is very boring. I watched it solely because I was curious and I wanted to see the tarot card monsters, but man, this was very rough. I don't even want to talk about this movie because I just want to forget it exists. Do not watch it. Just don't do it unless it's like a movie night where you want to watch a bad movie, but it is not bad in an entertaining way. It's just bad. That's kind of it. It's not exciting. All of these characters are super lame. Just don't watch it. I don't think you're going to be entertained. A 3 out of 10 for Tarot. One of the worst movies I've seen all year. Then I rewatched Ad Astra. Now, Ad Astra is a highly underrated sci-fi film. I have a review for this movie, believe it or not, and I loved this movie. I gave it a 9 out of 10, as you can see. This movie is great, and I'm so sad it's not getting the recognition it deserves. Watch my review. I stand by everything I said in it, so check that out on my channel. Also, watch or rewatch Ad Astra because it absolutely deserves your attention. The last movie I rewatched was Time Crimes. Now, this is another one of those films where I do not want to talk about the premise because it's best to go in blind. I just want to say that this is a sci-fi thriller revolving around a tiny bit of time travel, just a little bit of time travel that causes a big mess. That's how I'm going to describe it, and that's all I'm going to say about it. It just takes you places and it's fun. It doesn't have any famous actors in it. It has a very low budget feel to it, but the storytelling itself is truly excellent. And the way this movie develops the concept that it sets up is really good. This is how you work a concept in a movie. I'm going to talk about some underrated sci-fi movies very soon in my channel, so look forward to that, and I will definitely talk about this movie more there. As of right now, if you can watch this movie, definitely give it a chance because it is a story that is worth your attention. It is going to hurt your brain a little bit, but in a good way. A solid 8 out of 10 for me. And with that, that is the end of my May wrap up. This is a long video, and if you're still here, thank you so much for being here. You are awesome. Let me know what movies and TV series you have watched in the month of May. If you have some recommendations for me based on what I have told you today, obviously leave them in the comments below. And I hope you guys are having a wonderful day. I will see you very soon in my next video. Bye.